We'll now call this meeting to order. We'll now call to order the virtual meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. All participants are asked to keep microphones on mute and cameras off during staff presentations and committee discussions. Participants wishing to speak to an application during the public meeting portion of this meeting will be called on by name one at a time during the public meeting. At that time, the participant called on may unmute their microphone and turn on their camera if they wish to speak. If you wish to speak to or receive further notice regarding an application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. Public participants will receive another sign-in opportunity when the public meeting portion of this meeting is called to order. I am John Wanless, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. I will now take attendance of our committee members and staff. Please raise your hand or declare your presence when I call your name. Bill Curry. Jacqueline Grimes.
Here.
Councillor Wendy Alford.
On the phone.
Bill Whittemire. Jack Anderson.
Present.
Councillor Jay Brennan.
Present.
Planning Coordinator Mary Remig.
Present.
Senior Planner Carl Grinke.
Present.
To review, committee members are asked to raise their hand when they wish to speak. Members participating by phone will be called on from time to time to speak to an application. Alternatively, please find an appropriate opportunity at any available time to notify the chair verbally if you wish to speak.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. It's Councillor Alford.
Yes.
I can't seem to, I sent Dave, the IT guy, the fact that my iPad is not working for some reason. It says, and I was trying to let Mary know as well, but I don't know if Dave is involved.
Where did Mary
Mary
go?
and Dave. I don't know where she went.
She's disappeared from me too.
Okay.
Are you looking for me, John? Sorry.
Yeah, Wendy was addressing.
Yeah, I'm
I
just.
was asking if Dave is involved.
I'm going to touch base with Dave right now. Okay, Wendy?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I can try to follow by phone until they get it figured out.
Okay. Item number 2 on the agenda, approval of agenda.
I would so move.
Seconded by Jay. All in favor? Carried.
Aye.
Adoption of minutes. Planning Advisory Committee meeting, July 9th, 2020. I need a motion.
I would make the motion.
Jack, the seconder.
I'll
Jacqueline,
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Disclosure of monetary interest. Item number 5, public meeting. We will now open the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Please be advised you may leave this meeting at any time. Applicants, agents, and members of the public logged into Zoom to participate in the public meeting are asked to please keep their microphones on mute and cameras off until called on by the chair. If you wish to speak to an application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. The purpose of this Planning Advisory Committee meeting is to consider 2 applications in front of us. An application for permission under Section 45(2)(b) of the Planning Act as well as a zoning bylaw amendment application. Firstly, application number MV 2003 seeks permission to use the property identified as 280 Brockville Street for a towing operation within the border definition of warehouse, which is a permitted use in the C3 zone. This application has been made to accommodate a use that is not specifically and otherwise defined in the town's zoning bylaw. The second application is ZA 20-06 for 102 Brockville Street, purposes to rezone the subject property to residential type 4 with the site-specific special exemption R4-X for the purpose of accommodating 2 additional units on the property. The development of the third dwelling unit within the existing duplex building, dwelling house, and a site-specific special exemption to allow the conversion of the existing detached accessory structure to a detached dwelling unit. This meeting is your opportunity to provide any feedback on this application, and the Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions and comments you may have. We encourage you to do so at this public meeting, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objections later in the process may be limited if a written or oral comment is not submitted. The Planning Advisory Committee is the approval authority for the application under Section 45 of the Planning Act. Town Council is the approval authority for the application for amendments to the zoning bylaw. The committee will review the application and any comments or concerns from the public to inform their decision on the application MV-20-03 and recommendation to council for application ZA-20-06. I will now pass the meeting over to our senior planner, Carl Grenke, to report on notification and summary of the application MV-20-03. Following his presentation, I will call on public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also offer applicants or their agents in attendance to the opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave, do we have a PowerPoint lined up? Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm just to introduce myself. I'm Carl Grenke, Senior Planner with the town, and I'll summarize this application. This is a bit of an unusual application using a section of the Planning Act that we don't have a whole lot of experience using. Next slide, please. So this application applies to 280 Brockville Street. It's right at the south end of town, just across the road from the Settlers Ridge Mall, and just to the north of the border with the township of Rideau Lakes. It's surrounded by a bit of a mix of properties, or mix of land uses. So the applicants purchased the property for the purposes of relocating the towing business, Kitley Collision there. There's an existing building and a lot that's a little less than half an acre in size. There's no construction proposed, but the building department is advised that a permit is required to accommodate a few things, as well as a business license is also required. So all of these require confirmation of zoning. So the property is zoned highway commercial. It's a zoning category that allows commercial uses along arterial roads. So the bulk of the highway commercial zoning we see in town is along Lombard Street. There's also some to the north on Union Street, but this is just a little piece of highway commercial on its own. So a wide variety of auto-oriented businesses are permitted, but the towing business, what's being requested here, is not specifically defined or covered in zoning. Next slide, please. So poses a little bit of a dilemma for us when trying to figure out zoning compliance and seeing exactly where it fits. So there's no exact, it doesn't exactly fit within any of the existing definitions in the zoning bylaw. Therefore, it's not clear exactly that the use would be allowed or not allowed on the property. So when we have a situation like this, there's normally two planning processes that can follow. One, and the most common one, is a zoning amendment, and that's a case where there is that a formal application where we create a new definition and allow the new use in an area. And that especially applies if this is something hasn't really, it's very different from anything that's currently accommodated in the existing zone. The Planning Act in the same section as minor variances also allows us the opportunity to give a permission, and that's where, in a situation where the uses of the land, building, or structures permitted in the bylaw are defined in general terms, we can permit the use of any land, building, or structure for any purpose that, in the opinion of the committee, conforms with the uses permitted in the bylaw. So in this case, the applicants made an application under this section to ask the committee to interpret the zoning bylaw to support the towing business as a permitted use within the existing zone. So this isn't a zoning application. They're asking for us to interpret the zoning bylaw and looking at the broad range of uses and specific uses within the zoning bylaw to make the determination that it best fits within one. And it's a section that we don't often use, but we do have an old zoning bylaw, and certainly there's definitely situations where where a planning tool like this is very appropriate. And in this case, the applicant asserts that the towing business is similar in function, nature, and impact with the variety of permitted uses that are already allowed in the highway commercial zone. Next slide, please. So basically, what this application seeks is for us the town to allow it based on interpretation of existing definitions. So the application identifies warehouse as the closest existing definition that can apply to this use, and that definition includes some language that is applicable here. Also, the use also accommodates some similarities with auto servicing too, and that's something that's also permitted here. So there's a number of other C3 uses that are thematically similar to the towing business. And in the information report that was circulated to the committee and the public last week, we've identified the full range of uses in the C3 zone. So the business does, the building there, of course, accommodates a lot of the operational elements of the business, and the business also accommodates on-site servicing. So there's just a summary of what's done there. It's a mix of the office space, utility storage, and material storage, as well to ultimately to support the servicing that sometimes happens off-site. Next slide, please. So there's just a site map that was provided by the proponent, and I apologize, it did not transpose extremely well onto the presentation, but I'll note that there is no construction proposed. They are not planning on building a new building or anything, but just repurposing what's already there. Next slide, please. So there's just an indication of the Kittley Collision business that's replaced a previous commercial use at that location. So the building's been there for quite a while. Next slide, please. So normally if we're considering a minor variance application, the Planning Act prescribes 4 tests for us to consider. This isn't the same as a traditional minor variance application, but certainly as far as the 4 tests go, I think it's relevant for the committee to have a look at that and use this as an evaluation matrix. And I'll just go over those quickly in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So does the application conform with the general intent of the official plan? That's the first question posed here. The official plan designates the site for a corridor commercial development, and that's intended to primarily accommodate auto-oriented commercial uses, primarily along busier streets. So the plan contemplates a significant amount of flexibility for the development of a varied mixture of compatible in commercial and industrial uses. It's certainly notable within our commercial industrial zones. There's a lot of overlap between a lot of uses are permitted within both zoning categories. And then the designation also calls for lands to be zoned to permit auto-oriented commercial uses, including retail uses and auto services. So the designation would consider a use such as this on an arterial road. It would also consider a use such as this in a business park or mixed use corridor such as this. So certainly there's a number of places where something like this can be contemplated in the OP. And then the plan also considers, looks at an intake protection zone, wellhead protection areas that apply, and there's a condition in the draft decision that relates to that. Next slide, please. So does the application conform to the general intent of the zoning bylaw? And that's the challenge we have here. The zoning bylaw is actually older than our official plan, but generally that does line up with the broad intent. And certainly when we, at some point in the next couple of years, we'll be undertaking a comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw. We're really going to drill down into the definitions, but for now, what we have in effect is what we have to go by. And in the absence of specific wording, it's fair to say that terms and definitions can be read a little bit broadly to determine what the intent is. And the C3 zone does allow a wide variety of auto-related uses, including body shops, auto care, servicing, gas bars, sales, services, and rental establishments. The definition doesn't exactly cover what's contemplated here. If it did, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, and zoning would have cleared the project. So it doesn't exactly, and that's why we're asking the committee here to have a look and give us your thoughts. So the applicant, Mr. Powers, submitted retained a consultant planner, Tracy Zander, to provide a planning rationale, sort of summarizing this application and sort of within the context of this Planning Act tool that we have. And the rationale recognizes that the towing business parks, the towing vehicles and equipment and as temporary parking for customer care, which can be considered the storage of goods, and notes that the dispatch area can also fall under the permitted accessory office space. And the rationale also goes on to essentially summarize the existing C3 zone and the similarly defined businesses, and recognize that a towing business is a similar and compatible use to what's already contemplated in the C3 zone. And staff agree with that interpretation. Next slide, please. So is the proposal a desirable use of the land? And in this case, it is in a somewhat of a mixed use area with a variety of commercial, institutional, and residential uses in the area, but it's also similar and compatible with a range of other uses that are permitted in current zoning and as envisioned in the official plan. And I think what's also helpful for this particular property is the location provides very easy access throughout the town and also rural areas south of the town, which maximizes the ability to provide towing services and quicker access for this business to off-site clients. Next slide, please. The fourth test is simply just a question of minor in impact. So is Kittley Collision operating here in light of consideration of other existing uses in the C3 zone? Is this minor in impact? And in my view, it is minor in impact. The location is commonly recognized for commercial and auto-oriented uses, and we also haven't heard concerns from abutting property owners with respect to that. So, next slide, please. So the purpose of the public meeting here is the committee is asked to make an interpretation of the zoning bylaw, and we welcome feedback from the public in assisting assisting you in making that determination. It's an opportunity for community and neighbors to ask questions, also for the proponents to sort of summarize and provide comments themselves, and that helps the committee come to a decision on this application. Next slide, please. So in summary, the application seeks to clarify that the towing business generally meets the definition of a warehouse and can be permitted according to current zoning. So I think in this and in looking at our recommendation, we reflect the fact that there's no perfect fit in the existing zoning, and that's why we're here. If it was something completely different from what would normally be in the current zoning, then we'd be looking at a zoning application. And a warehouse does seem like an unusual fit given the usual meaning of the word. However, we and as well as the planning consultant too rely on the thoughtful consideration of the range, purpose, and impact of other uses permitted in the C3 zone and as contemplated in the official plan. So in looking at the totality of the existing C3 uses, an application to interpret the bylaw to accommodate this use in the existing zoning is reasonable and appropriate. So the alternative approach, applying for a zoning application to create a definition, that's a procedurally valid approach, and that's what they'd have to do if the committee doesn't accept the application. But given the nature of the use and what's also currently permitted within the C3 zone, in our view, this step here is appropriate. It's also it is a procedurally appropriate option for this particular instance. Next slide, please. So based on that, staff recommend the committee approves the application and subject to the conditions of a source water protection checklist or written confirmation of exemption from the risk management official. So like a lot of auto-oriented businesses, there is a potential impact that's not really tied into zoning, but more tied into the activities associated with the site. So that's something, regardless of whether they need a zoning approval, that is something that would need to at least be considered. And also the proponents would need to obtain the appropriate permits from the chief building official and a sign permit. Next slide, please. Oh, I guess there is no next slide. So I'll pause there and I'll pass the baton back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. We will begin by hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to this application, I will call on you by name one at a time to offer your feedback. We'll skip to the next item because we have no public participation. I will now open the floor to the applicant or their agent to provide any further clarification or comment on the public's concern. Tracy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carl's covered that very thoroughly, so I don't have anything to add unless the committee has any specific questions.
Thank you. I'll now ask for any questions or comments from committee members. Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm happy to support staff's recommendations. I did have a couple of questions more for Carl out of curiosity. I think it does fit within the C3. I wondered why one of the things on the list is automobile care, where it couldn't fit under automobile care as opposed to warehouse. Again, you've got some reason for putting it there, so I'm just curious to know what it is, Carl.
So thank you through the chair. I'm actually opening up the zoning bylaw right now. I don't have the paper copy in front of me. I just have the electronic one. So I will just scroll through that for a second and go to the definition for automobile care.
Oh, well, obviously it did not fit the definition for automobile care. So we can stop there, Carl, because if there's more than just automobile care and it defines it, I'm sure you've put warehouse because you needed to.
Yes, and I'm looking at the definition here, means a building or portion of a building where mufflers, glass, tires, and other similar minor parts and items are offered for sale and installation on motor vehicles. So it's a little bit different in terms of the broad focus is a little bit different in that case. There's, as I understand it, the use is a little more focused on servicing and often on site. Often off-site. So there's some thematic similarities, but the overall nature of the business is a little bit outside of that definition.
Okay, thank you. You've just educated me once again.
Jay,
Thanks, and thanks, Carl, for that. Yeah, of course, I'm going to support staff recommendation. A couple of questions. I know that this particular building, it was, I think, an eavesdrop company prior to this, and then prior to that, before my time, Wendy, was it a restaurant or what was it there?
No, wasn't a restaurant. That was part of the restaurant on the other side.
service station, wasn't it?
Service station. Okay. So obviously, from the pictures you provided, and we all drive by there all the time, the building looks good. I mean, they've really done a nice job on it. A tow truck company is an important service. I know they're not the only one in town, but you know, that you could almost argue that that's an essential service. I'm just wondering, and they're in business right now, right? And I'm just wondering how this came up at this point. How long have they been operating?
Carl?
So staff became aware of this when when we were asked about a permit late last year, and we've been working with the applicant on the process and just trying to find, because as you see, this is a different we're using a different section of the Planning Act than is something we're familiar with. So it took us a little while to work through the appropriate process for that. And in the meantime, while we knew that the applicant was working in good faith with us, we weren't taking any sort of enforcement action in terms of the use, since we knew they were taking the appropriate steps to get the zoning clarified.
Okay, good. And then I want to thank the applicant for doing business in Smith Falls. So I support this.
Anyone else?
I support it, John. I think the use that they've made of this, it's a good presentation on that on an access road into the town. And anytime I'm driving by, everything looks very organized. It's not an eyesore at all. And again, I think it's a prerequisite type of business for the area. And the fact that it's there's been no concerns, no objections from other people in the neighborhood. And I look at it as an automotive presentation, so I would support it.
Anyone else? Thank you. The committee is tasked in making a decision for this application under Section 45 of the Planning Act. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain the motion.
I'll move it.
Okay, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process for application MV-20-03. Any participants that have not signed in or required further notice regarding the application are asked to please reach out to the planning coordinator, Mary Remig, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights, as prescribed by the Planning Act, will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the public meeting for the application MV-20-03 for 280 Brockville Street.
And thank you, everybody. I will pass your kind words on to my clients.
Thanks, Tracy.
Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Tracy.
Bye.
I will now pass the meeting over to Senior Planner Carl Granke to report on notification summary for application ZA 20-06. Following his presentation, I will call on public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also ask the applicants or their agents in attendance an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, the PowerPoint is getting teed up. So our second application we're considering this evening is a couple of kilometers north on Brockville Street. It's just a residential intensification proposal. Next slide, please. So the address for this property is 102 Brockville Street. It's right at the corner of Elm in an established residential neighborhood. Next slide, please. So in this case, the property, it's about a fifth of an acre in size, and the existing house, it's roughly 130 years old, give or take. It is used as a duplex, has an attached garage access from Elm Street. The property from the exterior is very well maintained, and it is a property of interest identified by the Municipal Heritage Committee and Council. It's not designated under the Heritage Act, but it is a property of interest, and certainly it is quite well taken care of from the outside, and it's a lovely space there. So the parking area, there's a parking area for 4 cars located beside the garage. So what's being proposed here is renovations to allow 2 additional units on the property. So one would be within the existing house, so a division of the upper and lower story to create a new unit, and then also future conversion of the existing accessory building in a detached dwelling unit. So the property is zoned R2. It's a low density residential zone that doesn't, as of now, allow either of these. So what's being proposed is a rezoning to an R4 special exception. So R4 covers a lot of land in the town, just including land just to the north of this property, and that allows a bit more. Oh, next slide, please. The R4 zone allows more low and mid-density residential development. So accommodating an additional unit within the existing building would be considered a converted dwelling that's allowed within the R4 zone. A detached accessory dwelling unit outside of the house, however, is not permitted in the R4 zone, and that's why this application seeks a residential type 4 special exception, with the special exception being to accommodate that additional unit. So at some point in the future, in order to address recent changes to the Ontario Planning Act, the municipality will be looking at comprehensive zoning changes to accommodate residential units in detached buildings, subject to rules that council will define. But at this point, we can only rely on what's in effect at present, and then the applicants made their application to amend the zoning with what's in effect now. We don't know when these new rules are going to come into effect, and we don't know for sure how this proposal would be captured within whatever the new zoning rules end up being. So at this point, we have a proposal for a residential type 4 special exception zone. Next slide, please. So in order to support the application, a planning summary was provided that describes the proposal and summarizes it, as well as a detailed site plan and conceptual layout. So the parking will need to be reconfigured as required once the 4th unit in the attached garage is developed, and that would allow a configuration that has a narrower driveway access to accommodate current zoning standards, as well as enable winter operations and snow clearance. So that would be addressed as development unfolds in the future. Next slide, please. So there's a site plan, which unfortunately, again, doesn't always clearly transpose on the plan, but you see on the presentation, but you see the house more or less in the center of the lot, the detached garage in the bottom corner, as well as the parking area. Next slide, please. So it is a fairly large property as far as on a fairly high profile intersection. There's a large front yard facing Brockville Street with the parking and a lot of the amenity space at the rear and along Elm Street. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the public meeting is we do have an application to change the land use rules for an area of land, and consultation is an important part of that to help us make the right decision on an application such as this. So the public meeting, of course, allows the opportunity for community feedback and for neighbors to participate in the process and provide questions and concerns, and an opportunity for the proponents to speak to the proposal and address issues that come up. And all of this helps the committee inform and staff inform their recommendations to council. Next slide, please. So consultation, of course, is an integral part of the planning process, and this public meeting was advertised and in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act that require notice given to neighbors within 120 meters of the property, notification of applicable agencies, and notice posted on site. So the Act requires 20 days. However, due to the I guess the unusual circumstance of the virtual meetings, we've been extending that a little bit to provide, so giving closer to 30 days for most of our zoning applications, to give more of an opportunity for participation and for people to reach out to us if they have comments and coordinate their participation in this meeting. So in addition to the statutory process, we also engage with other agencies and departments early on in the process, Public Works being notable in this instance, just to identify any issues and make sure that if something does come up, then we address that earlier rather than later. Next slide, please. So when we have a zoning application and the committee considers it and council makes their decision, we have to look at the broad intent of the town's planning policy. So does this comply with the official plan? That's our guiding policy document that outlines council's vision for the community and where we want to develop and how we want to develop in the coming years. And it gives us some direction on where and how we want to see intensification and fit that within the community. We also want to and need to consider feedback from abutting property owners who might be most impacted by a zoning change, as well as those agencies that have legislative mandates and technical expertise. And the recommendations are made to council based on all the information that we've received, and council will have the ultimate decision on that on the zoning application. Next slide, please. So in the next steps, council and staff will review any written and verbal comments received, and a report and a recommendation will be brought forward. So a lot of residential intensification projects are subject to site plan control, and that's a more of a detailed technical process that follows zoning, where we look at grading, drainage, landscaping, a lot more of the technical things. In this case, the proposal accommodates an additional 2 extra units on the property, so that doesn't trigger site plan control, but certainly at this stage, what council is going to be asked for, and what we're asking the committee is to comment on the proposed land use. So the appropriateness of the 4 units proposed on this property in this configuration. So if you're interested in the outcome of the process and being advised of council's decision, we ask that you please contact Mary and ensure that we get your contact information so that we can circulate you the notice. And council's decision is, of course, subject to a 20-day appeal period. So I'll pause there and ask Mr. Chair to resume the public consultation part.
Thanks, Carl. We will begin the hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to this application, I will call on your name one at a time to offer your feedback. I'll jump to the next section because we have no public participants. I will now open the floor to the applicant or their agents to provide any further clarification or comment on the public's concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess our first comment would be just a thank you to Carl as well as Mary for the assistance that they've given us through this whole process. It's been much appreciated. And we're enjoying the work that we're doing on the house itself. And we look forward to hearing the committee's comments on the process itself.
Thank you. I will now ask if there are any questions or comments from committee members. Wendy? Can't hear you.
I definitely support staff's recommendation on this property. This is a wonderful example of what we hope as a council, as a member of council, that more of this will happen with our big, beautiful brick Victorians. And this property, especially that garage, is extremely attractive. So I'll look forward to the day when it is developed as well. But I think this is exactly what council was looking for in its strategic planning to have more infill and to have a property like this provide some more housing for what we know is difficult for some people right now. So I'm absolutely thrilled to support staff's recommendation on this one.
Jacqueline?
I just have a question for Carl in regards to the garage space and the development of that. Do you foresee any, in a few of our previous applications, we've had some parking issues with windows, the parking spot being too close to the window. Do you foresee any of that, Carl, with this particular dwelling being finished?
So the zoning bylaw, through the chair, the zoning bylaw establishes setbacks, minimum setbacks between the parking driving spaces and habitable room windows. So at this point, I will ask, I'll defer the question to the proponents as to their plans for the garage. I'm not aware of there being potential habitable room windows facing the parking areas, but I don't have a concept yet as far as how they're planning on accommodating development within that garage. So I will ask if any feedback the proponents can provide would be helpful.
Thank you, Carl. From our perspective right now, we're applying for the building itself for the ability to develop it in the future. The parking itself will be reconfigured so that it is compliant with the requirements of the town for parking on that site at the point of when we go through full development and that full application.
Anyone else? I have a question, Carl. I was just looking at the application. There's two different definitions here. There's a reference plan and a lot 258. But then there's another reference plan with another number that wouldn't apply to it at all, I don't think. And it calls for block F. I'm just wondering what the property consists of, because nothing's labeled on the site plan.
So,
see right here? Reference plan, block F, reference plan, lot 258.
Sorry, I'm just, I'm looking in at the application, the submitted paperwork right now. I will hopefully have some clarification in a few moments.
I'm not sure of that number.
Let's see, I have. And there's no dimensions on the lot. I'm skeptical of the area. That's the other thing. On the site plan, they have no dimensions on the lot at all. And they have ties to the boundary, which that's my other question to Mike, how they arrived at the ties to the buildings from the property.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm going to interject just real quick because I was taking a look at that application because thankfully I'm in the next room. So the one plan, that 13884 is the original plan of subdivision from the town. I would suggest maybe asking the proponents where that second number came from for the reference plan number, that 6-digit number that you're looking at, as well as the block F that's referred to. I don't have record of that forming part of the legal description for the property.
No, because the legal description on the lot is part of lot 258. Now that could have been, it's also got on there block F, which is also part of 13884. I see the other number is the instrument number that they've written in there on the legal description, so.
It just looks like they have correct information. The application was just possibly incorrectly filled out.
I got a question, Steve, for you. How did you arrive at the ties to the building from the property line?
We used the property lines that we were comfortable with the neighbors, as well as the ones we were shown while we were purchasing the property.
Okay. Any other questions?
Carl, are you still looking for something?
I think Mary actually, Mary found it before I did. So I'll thank you, Mary.
Mr. Chair.
Wendy.
Because this is a change of zoning application, so does any of that, the incorrect number, if it is indeed an incorrect number, does that pose a problem? I would pose that to Carl or to John.
Well, yes, Carl.
So the zoning would apply to, well, the zoning will apply, I guess, however council maps maps it on the bylaw that gets passed if council approves it. But what we would be proposing simply is the proposed zoning boundaries align with the property boundaries that we have in our system here. So the exact nature and the exact property or the legal description referenced in the application wouldn't make a big difference in terms of that. We would simply be mapping based on the property boundaries we have, and that would provide a clear indication of council's intent on the zoning.
And that will be coming to council when it comes to council. That will all be included.
Correct.
Thank you.
Jacqueline.
Mr. Chair, I guess I just want to have Carl clarify the feedback that we got from Troy Dunlop. He had a lot of questions about the parking, and there was a lot of he was looking for clarity on some of the widths and different things. Can you just shed some light on that, Carl?
Carl?
Mr. Chair, yes. So the comments that Troy raised were valid comments, and they reflect that the zoning bylaw has certain provisions for parking in terms of the minimum and maximum width of driveway spaces. So my understanding of the property is that the existing and current parking configuration does not comply with all of those provisions with the curb cuts and the width. So Troy's concern, of course, is that we not formalize a non-complying situation, especially if the parking lot needs to be added upon. So what we would be looking for when the parking lot does need to be added onto is that his concern is that we do our best to rectify those situations and limit the width and volume of entrances onto the property.
Jay?
Yeah, I read Troy's comments, and they're valid concerns, and that's when the auxiliary building is converted to residential. And I just heard Stephen say when they do that, they'll comply with all parking regulations or whatever we need to do. So I don't have a problem with that.
Carl?
So just to clarify as well, we did discuss Troy's comments with the applicants before this application was circulated to the public, and certainly at this point they did not request any relief from any of the parking provisions. So our expectation would be that when the parking area does need to change, that it change in a way that complies with zoning.
Any other questions? The committee is tasked with making a recommendation to council on the zoning bylaw amendment application. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion. Who moved it?
I don't know.
Look like Jay.
Moved by Jay, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process for application ZA 20-06. Any participants that have not signed in and require further notice regarding the application are asked to please reach out to the planning coordinator, Mary Remig, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights as prescribed by the Planning Act will be outlined on a notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the public portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. We will now move on to the next item on our agenda.
Thanks, Stephen and Mike.
Thanks everyone for your time.
Item number 6, priority issues. We have none. Correspondence, we have none. Project updates, nothing. Next meeting, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, August the 20th.
You have a project
2020.
update. You have a project update.
Do we?
Oh,
Yeah.
just a couple of quick things. One, the 16057 to 165 Beckwith Street. That was the 16-unit apartment that we looked at in late June. That has been approved by council. That actually ended up being a very interesting, from my end as a planner, it was a very interesting project just with respect to the density bonusing provisions that the Planning Act allows us to do, and just wording that within the context of the overall planning approvals. It was a tremendous learning experience for us, and I think we got a great great outcome there. That has been approved by council. It is in its appeal period right now. The other thing I would like to just let the committee know is on Monday night at the council did discuss sort of the return to work, return to, and the possibility of returning to in-person council meetings as well as committee meetings. And there was a discussion of a framework on that. At this time, however, the direction that we have is the committee meetings will continue to be virtual for the time being as we iron out some of the protocols, and we expect that that will come back for more discussion next month. So in the immediate term anyway, our committee meetings will continue to be virtual, but there is a possibility later on in the fall we might be looking to some form of in-person meetings. I'll ask Councillors Alford or Brennan if they have anything they wanted to add to that.
I think you captured it, Carl.
That's all for me right now.
Okay, item number 9, next meeting, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, August 20th, 2020. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I have a comment.
Yes, Jay.
I just want to compliment the chair on your work, John, on chairing these meetings. It's not, I did one the other night and it's a little bit challenging, but you've done a great job in the last few months. So, and you've given up Thursday night too, we know that. So that's a big commitment for you, I know, but you've done a great job. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
We
there's
have a
the dog.
motion for,
Here's your dog again, Jay.
He wants it.
he agrees.
Yes, he moved it. Aimlessly moved it.
Okay, Jay moved for an adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
See you later.
Next week.
Have a good one.